What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, That Guy Mile High, tuning back in for another reaction. This time we got top 10 scary discoveries made by forest rangers, part trace. I believe we actually did part one. I do believe, I think, pretty sure we did. It was part one or part two, one of them, like a month ago or something. But yeah, let's just jump into this and see what they're talking about. You know what I'm saying? Let go.
Hello everybody, I'm your host Woody, and I'm back at it again, bringing you 10 more scary discoveries made by forest rangers. We all know what we're getting into by this point, so let's just get right into it. Number 10, the boulder. This pair of rangers responded to a distress call at 4 in the morning that had come from a family camping in Joshua Tree. The story they heard from the family was something they likely hadn't expected to hear. One member of the family was woken up in the middle of the night when a pebble fell from a large boulder next to their site and hit their tent. When they got up, they looked towards the boulder and saw a humanoid creature standing on top of it. They described it as very skinny and strange looking, moving in weird ways, and its eyes glowing in the dark. They said they couldn't mistake it for an animal since it had a flat face, not like a mountain lion or a coyote. As they watched, the creature seems to go down on all fours, crawling down the rock before ascending it again and standing up. He had originally brushed it off as one of his cousins trying to play a prank, but once everyone had woken up, it was clear his whole family was accounted for. As they called out to it, it ran away, and he shined a light on it and said he can't really describe what he saw, except that it appeared to be naked and had a black mark on its body. The rangers tried to calm the family down by saying it was a mountain lion with mange, but I think we all know that what they saw was more than just a big cat. Number 9, artifacts. One ranger for a coastal park in South Carolina recounts his experience from opening up the park in the mornings. When preparing the park in the morning, you have to go on a complete park tour, which also means riding down the beach. The ranger said that in his 2 years working there, he would often find turkeys and chickens chained up on the beach, placed there to pass away when the high tide came. They also recounted finding many different strange artifacts that were either left behind or had washed up.
Was that like, this must be some like sacrificial nonsense right here. Like who in their right mind is like, yeah, let's just go just chain up a turkey or a chicken next to the water and let it drown? Like that's
on the coast, including things like random bones or pieces of clothing. He spoke to some of the other staff there, and many told him that this was the remnants of black magic. They also told him not to confuse it with root magic. While root magic is typically used for positive things like asking for love, health, or luck, black magic is generally more negative and usually involves a sacrifice, hence the chickens and turkeys that they had often found. Number 8, something near the campsite. A group that consisted of a park ranger and 3 botany nerds were hiking in the woods for a few days when they had an incredibly scary experience. Day 1 went off with no problems, but around dusk on day 2, they were startled by the sound of a scream. As they were all pretty experienced, they brushed it off as a coyote and just looked around the area. The next day, however, things got worse as they heard what they described as a tree falling down. As they searched around, they all saw a figure in the bushes looking out towards their campsite. They all started yelling loudly as they thought that maybe it was just a bear that they could scare off. But it wasn't a bear. They saw the figure again, a tall man seeming to be leaning over something and turning to look towards them again. When it stood up, it looked to be over 6 feet tall. As the ranger raised his weapon towards it in fear, it took off into the forest, apparently faster than any human or animal should be able to run. When they went back to the area to see what the man had been leaning over, they found the remains of an animal, but not looking like it had simply been attacked by some other predator. The group were rightfully scared and packed up camp, leaving the area, fearing what they thought might have been a Wendigo. Number 7, no tracks. This story comes from an instructor for a therapeutic wilderness program where he was in charge of the at-risk youth. He was on the clock in charge of the program for 16 days, 24 hours a day. His second year working with the program, he was staying at a campsite with the group, the shelters just being simple yurts. When they settled down that night, it had snowed, leaving a pretty thick coverage on the ground. He was woken up at around 1 in the morning when one camper had to go to the bathroom. When the camper returned, he told the instructor that he had seen someone out there wearing wearing a plaid shirt. He brushed it off as when he looked out, he didn't see anyone. But eventually, a few hours later, nature called him as well. And when he was out there, he saw someone standing in a plaid shirt. He quickly grabbed his flashlight to shine it on the figure, but in the split second it took him, the person disappeared. No sign of him anywhere around the area. He woke up another instructor to go and search for the person, but they didn't find anything. The scariest part? They didn't even find a single footprint in the snow. Number 6, strange encounter. This one is short and sweet, but I think one of the most bizarre and scary on this list for how real it is. The worker was surveying a restoration site near an old trail when he heard somebody walking up a nearby path. He grabbed all of his things and proceeded down the trail, walking confidently so as not to give the other person the idea that he could be easily taken advantage of. When he turned the corner on the trail, he saw a shirtless man swinging a crowbar around wildly. The man made eye contact with him and yelled out, "I've got a crowbar, I've got a crowbar." The worker mumbled out a quick, "Nice crowbar," before turning around and running back to his truck. So no ghosts or mythical beasts in this story, just a terrifying man wielding a crowbar. Totally normal. Number 5, BANJO audience. One park ranger was taking care of 2 pretty remote parks about 30 miles out from any occupied homes. And even then, these houses were usually empty during the summer months. One night, he decided to hop into his car and head to one of the darker parks so that he could take in the meteor shower that was going to be happening and also get in some practice on his new banjo. He was sitting on a park bench under the stars playing with the banjo strings when he started to get an uneasy feeling in his gut. No, he hadn't eaten some bad food. He was getting the feeling that somebody was watching him. Questions started to go through his head like, what if someone shows up? This is the burned car park. What if they come back? He continued playing to try and avoid the silence when he heard sounds coming from the bushes and he started to really panic. The sounds seemed high-pitched and he started to wonder what reason children could have to be deep in the park late at night. As it turns out, it wasn't children. Instead, 3 coyotes came running out of the bush. Apparently, they'd been enjoying the concert. Number 4, PHILMONT Scout Ranch. A ranger who worked at PHILMONT Scout Ranch in New Mexico told his story of what had happened on one of his trips, it being a summer camp combined with a backpacking trek. The group were around Uraca Mesa. It's in the shape of a skull and has various different legends surrounding it, like it being haunted or even being a portal to the underworld. One of these stories is that at night you can see strange and unexplained...
Like, don't we use skulls for, like, bad things? You know what I'm saying? Like, why would you want, like, see, people are too curious. Curiosity killed the cat.
Just coming from the top. Well, this ranger had worked there for 4 years now and never saw them, thinking it was just some crap made up by the other staff. Until one night, a kid pointed up at the mesa and made notice of lights coming from the top. The ranger brushed it off as being the lights of the other group who would be joining them. But when he looked, he realized the lights weren't coming from the trail. They were coming from off to the right behind the mesa, and it didn't look like flashlights at all. They were bright blue. 15 minutes later, the other group arrived and the lights were still there, putting away any ideas that it might have been them. To this day, he has no explanation for what the lights could have been. Number 3, intense pressure.
But it was the aliens.
This story comes from a worker who was doing a survey in a park in the interior of British Columbia. Most of the rest of the crew had already gone home, leaving behind just him and his boss together for a few days to confirm coordinates and finish up some mapping. They made their way out to one area on an old logging route, and from the second they got there, he said that things felt off. 15 minutes later, they heard an incredibly loud whomp sound, saying he could feel the pressure in his ears. He looked towards his boss, who also looked incredibly pale, and they heard the sound again, saying the intense ear pressure and chest pressure made him feel like he was being squeezed. They immediately packed up and left, not discussing the event and never figuring out what it was. But he says that it was most similar to the feeling and sound of a giant bird flapping its wings, leaving many people to believe that he had experienced the legendary Thunderbird. Number 2, the soldiers.
Bruh. You motherfuckers in these goddamn Sasquatch-ass creatures and shit.
A crew of about 10 people were out in a park in Washington State building dig lines. They were deep into it, about 60 miles from any other sign of life. As they were walking, they came across a clearing. The weird part was that there were 2 helicopters there, along with 7 fully armed military personnel. They had pointed their rifles at the crew, demanding to know what they were doing in the area. They said that they were doing dig lines and had been scheduled to be there, putting their hands up in fear. The soldiers told them to turn around and leave and forget they were ever there. The frightened people said that they were doing government work and they had to be there. One of the military men responded by saying, "No, you're not. Not today. Get the F out of here." They weren't going to argue with that, so they turned around and quickly went on their way. I'm sure we've all thought at least once that the government is hiding something from us, and this is a good sign that there's more than meets the eye. I'm not going to tell you they were guarding aliens, but I bet they were guarding aliens. Number 1, abandoned. This one comes not from a forest ranger, but instead from a soil conservationist who spent a lot of time looking at cropland and prairie restorations, saying it wasn't uncommon for him to find himself miles from the nearest road. One time, he was in a pretty heavily wooded area of his county, about a mile from the road, when he came across a clearing. But it wasn't empty. Instead, it was an abandoned playground and school bus with a rusty swing set and a huge rainbow merry-go-round. While this is creepy enough on its own, he was extra terrified by the fact that the merry-go-round was spinning rapidly in circles, with nothing in sight that would have caused it to move. He called out, and it didn't seem that any people or animals were around the area. Freaked out, he turned around and made his way back. He thought it must have been an old school, so he asked his archaeologists to look and see if anything had ever existed there. But they couldn't find anything about it, or why there would have been a playground deep in the woods. Thank you guys for watching. That was 10 more scary discoveries made by forest rangers. I've been Woody, and you've been amazing.
Yeah, you don't want none of that. Anyways, man, y'all let me know what y'all thought about that one down in the comments below, which was the video that, you know, most interested you. And let's talk about it. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.